Today's presenter is Ashley Spitzer, who is a licensed professional counselor and a Meru health therapist based out of Denver, Colorado. And she specialized in teaching communication skills that allow for improved connection and belonging. Without further ado, Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayu. And thank you, everyone. Welcome. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So today I figured we will start with a mindfulness exercise for just a few moments. So I'll invite you now to commit to being present in this exercise for the next few minutes, where our intention will be to bring gratitude into this day and this presentation and what we have ahead. So begin by just closing your eyes or lowering your gaze to the floor. And deeply inhale peace. And exhale any stress you're holding on to in this moment. Go ahead and do this a few more times. And as you return to your normal breath, begin by feeling gratitude for this moment. This time dedicated to focusing on everything in your life that brings you gratitude, big and small. And imagine a ball of light starting at your feet. Notice your feet, toes, and ankles that have taken you on this journey we call life. All of the contributions they've made in enriching your everyday. And notice as the ball of light slowly travels up your calves, knees, and thighs, appreciating each of them, grateful that they have helped you for so many years and in so many ways. And as the ball of light travels up your torso and gives energy to your hips and internal organs that keep your body functioning, healthy and alive, even in times when we're stressed or we feel lost, we are deeply appreciative for the vitality of these parts. Let's now honor our chest, lungs, and heart as the ball of light and love allows us to focus on the miracle of this part of our body, working without us needing to do anything. We are so grateful, even when we constantly forget. And as the ball of light passes over our arms, we're thankful for them. Our fingers, wrists, and hands that have been there for us since birth. Behind every email we send, webinar we sign up for or attend, we so often take advantage of all that they do for us. And so we thank them. And coming up to your throat, the ball of light and energy grows and expands around your mouth, ears, nose, and eyes, your brain. There's so much to be grateful for as we thank these parts. Thank you for the ability to speak love into others' lives, to apologize when we've hurt another, the desire to move towards our values with hope and optimism, ears to hear, from music to the sound of laughter of the voice of our loved ones, and a nose to smell all that this wondrous earth has to offer. Let's take this time to be appreciative. And take a deep breath as your whole body lights up with love and appreciation. And if you'd like, I'll invite you to set the intention to pay special attention and express gratitude for all that your body allows for the rest of the day. Know that you can always come back to this space of gratitude and appreciation and allow it to carry you through any moment in which you need it. And when you're ready, take one more deep breath. Begin to open your eyes, wiggle your fingers and toes, and return your attention to the room and our meeting. Thank you all for joining me in a moment of mindfulness. Always a beautiful way to start our time together. And now we'll move into our webinar. So for today's agenda, we're going to be reviewing the DBT, so dialectical behavioral therapy skills and interpersonal effectiveness skills. Then we're going to revisit DEAR, which I know many of you are familiar with from the Meru program, which is all about getting what you want or saying no. We'll move into a few more of the interpersonal effectiveness skills with GIVE, maintaining the relationship, and FAST, how to maintain self-respect, all of which are acronyms. Then we're going to go into writing a script. And from there, if we have time, we will engage in the Q&A. So like Mayu had said, feel free to leave any questions in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them at the end if there's time. So I'd like to start with a quote I find really powerful that comes up a lot in communication. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. This is one many can relate to, in that we often might assume people know what we need, or feel like they should be able to know what we need, or like we've tried to communicate, but we're afraid to communicate for what we need. And yet that can be such an illusion, keeping us from getting what we want, being able to effectively communicate, and stray away from any mind reading that the conversation has already been had. So today we're, of course, going to address how do we tend to these communication needs more effectively and head on. So what you'll need for this training is a journal or paper for you to write with, and then a writing utensil, an example of a recent or upcoming situation where you'd like to ask for something that you need or set a boundary. So getting what you want or saying no, and a willingness to try something new, practice vulnerability, and participate. Sometimes parts of these skills can seem intuitive, like things we know, and yet oftentimes we're not practicing all of them together intentionally. So I want to invite you to be willing and open to do something new, or be open to trying some things you might already know, but in a different way. So to start, I'm going to have Mayu help us with a poll. I want to know what sorts of challenges we face when communicating. So you can select any of the options here. We have the first: I struggle to respond instead of react. I quickly become upset, angry, distressed, or emotional. Second is I identify as a people pleaser and don't want to say anything that may cause someone to like me less. Third is I struggle to express myself confidently and to find the right words. Fourth, we have I sometimes assume that others know or should know what I need or how I'm feeling. And 5, I hate conflict. I avoid it at all costs. So select as many or as few as resonate with you in your experience. Keep this open for just a moment. And 2, if there's something that isn't here that's your struggle with communication, please do feel free to leave it in the chat box so we can see that as well. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll. Okay, so looks like the winners here are I struggle to express myself confidently and to find the right words, along with identify as a people pleaser and don't want to say anything that might cause someone to like me less. Absolutely. And looks like pretty good representation for each of these across the board. So glad that these are resonating. We're going to talk about how to address these difficulties, and also want to validate just the common humanity in these struggles. When we care about people and we want to maintain our self-respect, it can be really tough to know what to say and how to do so effectively. So, wanting to start with a review of dialectical behavioral therapy. DBT was developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan in the 1970s, and it is all around the premise of a dialectic. And a dialectic is acknowledging that two seemingly opposing experiences or truths can coexist. And a dialectic really validates the complexity within our human experience and keeps us from engaging in the all or nothing thinking that we so often engage in, where we dismiss part of our experience. Honoring the dialectic reminds us that we can look at the whole picture and validate what is true, while also considering change. So a simple way to embrace a dialectic that you've likely heard your Meru therapist or possibly therapists engage in before is using the word and instead of the word but when you're describing an experience. So for example, instead of saying, I'm struggling, but I'm doing my best, or I'm anxious, but I'm going to show up anyways, saying, I'm struggling and I'm doing my best. I'm feeling anxious and I have prepared for this. I'm feeling nervous and excited, doing my best and want to improve. This statement really honors the dialectic and that there can be two seemingly opposing parts of our experience, and that paradox is very much our human experience as emotional beings. So dialectics are important to embrace in all situations, and again, really do set the premise for dialectical behavioral therapy. And I think a good example to really hone in on is this optical illusion many of us have seen. What do you see here? Is it the glass? Is it the faces? Well, it's both, right? So can we honor both parts and that both elements are true here? So some examples of dialectics that I'd like to share with you. Feeling stuck and wanting change, knowing that both are true. Snow in the spring months. I'm here in Denver, and I know this happens to us all the time. With COVID, feeling frustration and appreciation during the months of quarantine that we're missing friends and travel and quote unquote normal times, and also missing or appreciating the slower pace of life, more time with family and our pets, less engagements, experiencing fear and excitement at the same time. In fact, those often happen, and we can have way more than one emotion at once. Two or more emotions can coexist and do. Being really happy for someone's accomplishments and feeling a sense of envy for what they have, wanting what they have, or wanting something similar, and still being fully happy and encouraging for what they've come to have. And being angry after someone has hurt us and loving them deeply, knowing that we can feel both. We can honor both parts of that experience. So I want to encourage you all to write down a dialectic that honors your true experience today, that looks at all of the different parts of your experience and gives all of them acceptance and honors them, whether that be differing emotions, really resonating with that feeling stuck and wanting change. I want people to like me, and I want to get my needs across. So go ahead and jot that down, and you're welcome to also share that with us in the chat box as well, if you'd like. So in DBT, we're really focusing on the dialectic between acceptance and change. We need to accept where we're at and the reality of our situation before we can move towards change. And we will likely have to change our outlook in order to fully embrace that acceptance of where we are. So not only do acceptance and change coexist, they really do rely on each other. And so that's what DBT is all about: skills for acceptance and change, which are reflected in the 4 modules of DBT. And next slide, we'll show them with a little bit more ease. So DBT is made up of 4 modules Mindfulness and distress tolerance are focusing on accepting the moment or managing it. With distress tolerance, it's accepting a difficult or distressing emotion and accepting it in the moment, the reality that it is. And then the interpersonal effectiveness and emotional regulation skills are focusing on change. Today, of course, we're focusing on the interpersonal effectiveness skills in DBT, but I wanted to highlight here some skills from the Meru program that align with the other modules in the different weeks. So feel free to take a screenshot of this or jot down some of the different exercises that might align with the different areas of DBT and those acceptance and change skills. So with interpersonal effectiveness, I have to first say that I love these skills. I practice what I preach, and I do find that these skills are really effective in helping us meet all three of these goals. The three goals of interpersonal effectiveness show up in the triangle. It's meeting an objective, which essentially means getting what we want or saying no, maintaining self-respect, and maintaining the relationship. Oftentimes we find that one of these has to go out the window so that we can meet the other two. So, a lot of us resonated with being people pleasers. A lot of times we'll dismiss that self-respect piece because we want to maintain the relationship. And yet, we want to make sure that we're holding all of these with equal value. And that's what the interpersonal effectiveness skills are allowing us to do. And I want to note here too that while this is assuming that this is a relationship we want to keep, meaning that it is not an abusive or unhealthy relationship. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a relationship where we might love or really like the other person. I always give the example that in college, I had a landlord that was not the nicest person and probably took quite a bit of advantage of us as younger college students. However, why would I want to maintain that relationship? Well, need a place to live. So it doesn't always mean that this is, our best friend, our partner. This might be someone in which we want to keep the peace and maintain a relationship. But of course, we're using these skills, assuming this is a relationship that is healthy, that we want to keep, or that we need to nurture. So the way that we're meeting these different goals are through the different skills we're going over today. Dear Man, which again, we're familiar with Dear from the Meru app, is about that meeting an objective, so getting what we want or saying no. Maintaining self-respect is the fast skill, and maintaining the relationship is give. We will be going over each of these. So in the situation you've chosen, which point of the triangle do you think will be easiest for you to do effectively? So the situation, the interpersonal situation that you've brought to today's webinar. And which point of the triangle do you anticipate struggling with the most? Take a moment to consider these. Some of us tend to have strength in one area and not so much another. And feel free to share also in the chat what might be one of the more difficult areas for you, so that we can really target that areas of skill today. And I'll invite you to bring your attention to that skill as we move through today's webinar. So one more skill before we move into the interpersonal effectiveness skills is wise mind. That is really important to review. We have three mind states that you can see here in the Venn diagram. On one side, we have our rational mind. I like to think of our rational mind as our Excel sheet. It uses facts and logic to make sense of our experience. And on the other side, we have our emotion mind. And for this one, I always think of my dog. It uses feelings and emotion to make sense of our experience. Now, oftentimes our emotion mind actually gets a bad reputation since it can be reactive. However, emotions are what make us care. They're what help us identify what our values are and what matters to us. And as emotional beings, it's really important that we do not just entirely neglect them, but attend to them. So we really need both the rational mind and the emotional mind. And in DBT, we consider this to be the wise mind. The wise mind is the synthesis of the two. It's weaving the two of them like a basket, not kind of like looking at both, but not finding a way to integrate them, but instead using our wise mind is being able to go deep within and access our intuition to know what the most effective course of action is to pursue. The more we reflect on what our wise mind has to say by listening to both sides of these and integrating them, the more likely we are to do what works and be willing to tolerate the difficulties that arise along the way. So why is wise mind important for effective communication? Well, we cannot access wise mind at the peak of an emotion. So it's really important that we're using skills to regulate our emotions and tolerate distress, whether that be before a difficult conversation, in the middle of a conversation. If it does get too heated, knowing when to pause and say, you know what, I'm noticing I'm moving into emotion mind, so I need to take a break, and we'll come back to this. Let me come back to you within the next 24 hours, and making sure you let them know you'll come back, so we're not just dropping the conversation. But in order to effectively communicate, we've got to be in wise mind. We cannot be at the peak of emotion mind. So really making sure that we are getting in touch with our wise mind and thinking clearly before engaging in a meaningful interpersonal conversation. And again, knowing when to walk away or take a break. We all know what it's like to be trying to communicate in emotion mind and doesn't go so well, doesn't allow us to meet the 3 objectives of interpersonal effectiveness. So here is just a fun comic I thought was suitable. It says, this tantrum has been powerful, honest, and riveting, and I think we should give him what he wants. So just a great way of acknowledging that, when we're either communicating aggressively or stuck in emotion mind, it tends to not really go so well or be as riveting as we hoped for. And that's why we really want to focus on these assertive skills. So a couple more keys that are important to note. Come in with a plan. A script really is encouraged, and I highly recommend writing out a Dear Man, and that's what we'll do today. But before you go into a conversation, and when I say Dear Man, just to be clear, that's the acronym for the skill. If either party starts to get into emotion mind, again, encourage a break and include a plan for when you'll reconvene. And finally, use yourself as a tool. What I love about these interpersonal effectiveness skills is we can use our own response when we're kind of thinking through what's the best way to communicate this, right? So thinking, how would I react if someone said this to me? Would I feel defensive? Would I feel frustrated? Would I be understanding? Really use your own response as a tool. And we want to also be thinking of all 3 goals of the interpersonal effectiveness triangle at all times, knowing that, our goal is to maintain the 3 of them and honor all of them. So kind of embracing the dialectic of that in itself, and not just maintaining self-respect or just meeting our objective. So I don't want to spend too much time here, but I think it's important to acknowledge the communication styles that we have. I do get a lot of participants always saying, well, I don't know how to communicate because I don't want to be aggressive. I feel like I have to be passive or aggressive. And there is room for assertiveness there that we want to make sure we're addressing. But I think this graph is a good way of acknowledging that there is the passive, which is that I lose, you win. The passive aggressive, which is I lose and you lose, because it's indirect and dishonest and does not fully address the underlying problem. I'm actually saying now this one should be where it says passive aggressive here in the corner should be assertive. So pretend this says assertive up here. This is for the direct and clear communication style, where we're stating our needs and experiences appropriately, listening and asserting, using I statements, speaking calm, clearly, and confidently, and making space to hear the other and understand them. And this is where the I win and you win with assertive communication. And then, of course, there is aggressive, where it's I win, you lose, because it's direct but hurtful, sometimes even unclear because it's so dominating and can just provoke fear. And so we want to move towards this assertive communication style where I win and you win. I apologize again for the typo there, that's confusing, but top corner here is the assertive communication. So another comic here, just for fun. She was too aggressive when I got her, so I trained her to be passive aggressive with the dog sitting on the leash. I think communication and assertive communication it's a skill, it is an art. And so knowing how to assertively communicate our needs really does start to feel so empowering, and that we can actually get what we want or say no and still walk away feeling proud of how we've interacted. So, I think I'll share the link for this in the chat, but for time's sake, we're going to skip over this. So Mayo, if you don't mind sharing this in the chat, that would be wonderful. I love this clip. It's SNL's Passive Aggressive Pam, and I think just does a great example of illustrating passive aggressive communication, and sometimes can actually feel a little bit like it's yelling at us because it resonates with how we might try to communicate things clearly, but end up not being as clear as we'd like. So I definitely encourage you to watch it, not only for a laugh, but to build some awareness of what passive aggressive communication looks like, but not necessarily that assertive communication that we want. So we're finally going to move into the Dear Man scale, which again is an acronym. The Dear part is what we're doing, and Man is how we're doing it. So while in the Meru program, we of course go over Dear, I want to give you all my little pointers around Dear because I use this skill every single day and find it incredibly helpful, and also want to make sure that we're going over the how skills as well. So the D stands for describe. With this, we want to make sure we're being specific and clear. Describe the situation, stick to the facts, and really limit it to one situation. I always give the example, I unfortunately am someone who runs late, but if someone were trying to let me know that they were feeling hurt after I came late several times, if they said to me, Ashley, you're always late, I would immediately come up with defensiveness and be like, wait, well, I was on time last Tuesday, and I think, twice the week before. When we use an overwhelmingly large example, it tends to bring up that defensiveness in us. And, we are wired for protection. We're going to show up with defensiveness if we feel attacked. So instead, if someone were to say to me, hey, Ashley, yesterday when you were 15 minutes late to our meeting, I felt disappointed that we weren't able to start on time and disrespected. There's the facts. There's nothing I can argue with there if that is exactly what happened in that specific situation. Not only am I likely to be less defensive, I'm also, these are just the facts that are being stated to me very clearly. So even if you're dealing with a situation that happens every single day, make sure to journal about that, vent to a support about it. However, when we're wanting you to get what you want here and be able to effectively communicate, make sure you're being really specific and limiting the situation to one situation. Next is express. It's really important to express how you're feeling in the situation using an I statement. Don't assume that they know how you feel, and make sure that you are naming a feeling and not saying you make me feel, hurt, you make me feel disrespected, but instead, I felt hurt, I felt frustrated, I felt disrespected. This is really owning your experience and making sure that the person is clear on how you felt. While again, a lot of us can assume others know how we feel, they likely don't. We can't mind read. Even as a therapist, I'll tell you, I can't mind read. So it is very important that we're being open and clear about what that emotion is. Next is assert. Assert your needs by asking for exactly what you need or what you're saying no to. Make it 100% clear. This is something I see people fall into a struggle with a lot. We go into a situation, let's say, we feel like our boundaries aren't being, or we don't feel they aren't, our boundaries aren't being respected at work. But we go into a conversation where we say, I'm working overtime, I'm not able to leave on time, but we don't have a very clear ask. And so the person ends up kind of looking at us or not being sure what to do and unclear on what it is that we're asking for. In order for you to get what you want, it is really important that you go in with the exact ask or exact clarity around what that boundary is. So make it as clear as air. What is it that you're asking for? What do you need? This will really help the person not only know what to give to you, but you'll have a better chance at getting what you want here, as opposed to them possibly coming up with an idea. And then reinforce. This one sometimes is misused. Reinforce isn't about just repeating what you already said. It's actually your way of clarifying how this would benefit both you and the other person. So this isn't just saying, again, I'd like to ask to leave on time. It'd be saying something like, I think that if my boundaries were more respected at work and I was able to leave at 5 p.m., I'd be able to come in with more energy, feeling more focused and clear on the work. And it would really allow me to sustain my role here for longer and feel more satisfaction here? How is this going to help both parties? Use this as a way to create buy-in. So again, that's what we're doing, is describing, expressing, asserting, and reinforcing. How we're doing it is with demand skills. So stay mindful. Actually, a little side note, in DBT, Dr. Marshall Inhan does love to have acronyms that don't actually start with the letters like this, so stay mindful. So just keep your eyes open for a few of those. But the big takeaway here is being mindful. So staying on topic, remain focused, use your breathing to ground. Don't be afraid to repeat your assertion. It might even be okay to sound a little bit like a broken record, because sometimes people will try to take us off of topic. You might be talking about boundaries at work, and let's say your boss brings up, well, actually, we've had to work on these different projects, or, I want to talk to you about something else. Be sure that you're ignoring any attacks or attempts to change the topic and bringing it back to the focus by staying mindful and what is the purpose of this conversation. And you can politely say, I'm hearing that there are other things we have to discuss. Right now, I want to make sure that we're focusing on this topic, this focus, and we can come back to those things after. Appear confident. There's a reason it's appear and not just be confident, because even if you don't feel like it, it's important that we show up and are appearing with a body language that reflects confidence, that we're appearing effective and competent, using a confident tone and physical stance while making eye contact when appropriate. So many times when we're engaging in communication, if we're feeling aggressive, we get bigger and try to tower over the other person. If we're feeling either a lack of confidence or insecure, we tend to get smaller, shrink, fold our arms. And we really want to make sure that we're standing confidently. We're taking up space, but it's in the same amount of space that the other person is taking, and kind of meeting them where they're at. If they're sitting down, you sit down too. If they're standing, you stand. Make sure that you're meeting each other on the same level, because that does foster the assertive communication. And finally, negotiate. This has a little caveat to it. That is, as long as you're sticking to and honoring your values. We're not asking you to negotiate if it's getting in the way of maintaining your self-respect. But as long as you're sticking to your values, be willing to give to get. Offer and ask for solutions while you're remaining assertive. So, if this person is saying, no, I can't have you leave at that time, you might say, okay, well, what would be a time that we can agree on that I can leave that's still, honoring my boundaries or keeping me from working overtime, or, I'm struggling then to find a good alternative. Can you help me understand why and, where we might be able to negotiate here? But we do want to kind of think about this beforehand, where we'd be willing to negotiate that is still in line with our values. I love this quote here by Brene Brown: clear is kind, unclear is unkind. That's speaking a little bit more to the dear skills here, but the clearer we are in what we're asking, the kinder we're being, not only to ourselves, but the other party. And so I think Dear Man really does hone in on the importance of clarity. So in this situation, it's just an example, and I'd love to have some people share their responses in the chat. But in this situation, you and your coworker share several end-of-the-day tasks. For the last few weeks, they've asked you to do them 4 out of 5 days, giving a valid reason why they need to be home earlier. You've now missed your gym class most evenings. So on the left-hand side, we have an example of what not to do. And on the right-hand side, we have an example of using Dear Man. So I'll first read through what not to do. And I want you to just pay attention. Use yourself as the tool right now. How do you feel as I'm reading these? So in speaking to you, you always make me do our shared tasks, and you never help or consider my schedule. You shouldn't assume I can do them just because you're busy. You make me feel like I don't matter. I need you to help me more. I won't be willing to help you anymore if not. Take a moment. How do you feel? What do you notice in response? I even notice some tightness in my chest as I'm reading it, some defensiveness creeping up. Now, take a deep breath, recenter, and I'll read through the Dear Man way. Over the past 2 weeks, I've completed the end of the day tasks each day and was unable to get out of work on time to attend my gym class. I feel frustrated and discouraged that I haven't been able to get out of work on time to engage in self-care that is important to me. I'd like for us to come up with a schedule where we split this task equally. I really believe this will allow us to both plan accordingly so that we can get out of the office on time. Take a moment. What do you notice that's different? How do you feel on the receiving end? Of course, my tone has shifted too, but within the words, what is different about the situation? Please do feel free to share in the chat. I think this is a good example of identifying, the importance of shifting up our language and being more assertive and clear, making sure that we're not putting the other person on the defense. So we're going to take a moment here to write out your dear man script. I'm going to have Mayu help by sharing this feeling wheels link, or you know what, I'm actually going to go ahead and put this in the chat for us. And we're just going to take a moment here. And I want you to go ahead and use the situation that you identified earlier to write down your script as you walk through each: the describe, express, assert, and reinforce. And then note some ways that you would be able to attend to man. So how will you remain mindful? How will you appear confident? How might you be willing to negotiate in this specific example? Yeah, really great examples coming up in the chat here in what you're noticing. So just for time's sake, I'm going to encourage you to take a screenshot of this or continue to work on your script. And make sure that you do utilize the feelings wheel here. I think sometimes we're not really clear on what it is that we're feeling, and that can lead to quite a bit of important awareness as well. Anyone has questions coming up, reflections, please do feel free to share them in the chat with us. For time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and make sure we're moving on to the give skills. So give, for those of you who noticed that you might struggle with the maintaining the relationship aspect, the give skills communicate respect for the other person's feelings to help cultivate and maintain healthy relationships. Now, again, these might sound like things you might know. However, I will tell you, every time I revisit this, I tend to notice there are some things I could be doing a little bit differently in assertive communication. And so I love this quote by Harriet Lerner here: if we would only listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. That is really our goal with Give, is to show up and hear the other person with the same passion and intention that we want to be heard. So we'll go through each of them, but G is for gentle, I act interested, V for validate, and E, easy manner. And I want to make an important little note here. We always want to make sure we're tailoring these skills to the person and the situation. For example, we need to be mindful of any cultural differences when communicating. So a good example is in some cultures, eye contact can be perceived as rude or aggressive. So we want to be mindful of who we're talking to and how we are engaging in assertive communication with them, just to make sure that the other person is comfortable and that we are acting in a manner that's going to, again, allow us to maintain the relationship, get what we want or say no, and maintain self-respect. So with gentle, might sound obvious, but really consider the ways that you might bring gentleness into this conversation. Treating the other person with respect you'd want during a possibly challenging conversation. Being mindful of your tone and your body language. Is there a way that you might present that shows more gentleness? Leaning in, nodding, uncrossing your arms, maintaining the same level of the other person. Be mindful of not judging, attacking, threatening, or dismissing their point. And really want to encourage you, when you notice any sort of frustrating and visceral emotion or just heightened emotion coming up, take a moment to slow down, take a deep breath, engage in some deep breathing to help engage your parasympathetic system and slow you down before responding in order to maintain that gentle presence. 80% of our communication isn't based on the words that we say, but instead how we're presenting, our tone, the way, of course, our communication sounds, but not so much about the words. And so how do we come off in a way that's gentle, that's going to allow the other person to hear us? With aggressive communication, let me just show an example. If I'm screaming at you, you can hear me, but are you really hearing the words that I'm saying? Likely not. So making sure that we're really focusing on the gentleness here and using and statements when appropriate to make space for both points, right? So like, I know you have obligations that you need to get to after work, and I need to take care of my self-care as well. We want to make sure it's not just using the but statements that, again, dismiss the whole other half of the sentence. Act interested. Now, this one always, for some reason, reminds me of interacting with my sister. We have opposite likes. She loves sci-fi and video games. Those aren't really my areas of interest. And so in order, though, to maintain our relationship and make her feel heard, it's really important that I act interested and do find ways of engaging with interest in our conversation. So listening and appearing interested, really making sure you're listening while practicing mindfulness as though you're listening to them for the first time. It is amazing how different we feel. And just kind of think of a conversation where someone did act interested, was looking at you, listening to you, holding eye contact when appropriate, how that made you feel differently and feeling heard as opposed to, when someone's not paying attention. I always think of, when we're on Zoom or a virtual meeting and someone's clearly doing something in the background, not really listening, just saying, we don't feel at all heard and much less likely to engage assertively. So being really mindful of paying attention and being mindful in that moment. Don't interrupt them in speaking. I personally struggle with this one, and it's one that I always remind myself of how to make sure I'm listening, wait until they're done, and then respond so that I'm really making sure I'm, again, listening with the same passion that I want to be heard. Ask questions that illustrate care and curiosity. Follow-up questions are really important. So instead of, okay, so you don't feel respected, in what ways might you feel more respected? Or, I'm curious what it is that made you notice that or feel that way. Just really leaning into the curiosity. And then be patient and respect what they may need and when they may need to have a break to be able to have a more comfortable conversation. So you might need to change your settings to somewhere more comfortable or somewhere more private. It might have to be a time where they can listen. Now, of course, if there's avoidance going on, we want to make sure we're addressing that. But we want to make sure we're setting up an environment where they are feeling respected and like they can engage in the conversation with us. Validate, an underratedly helpful skill, truly. Use your words, actions, facial expressions, and body language to show that you understand and that you want to understand the person's point of view. Reflect back what you're hearing. This is amazing because it's just allows us to feel heard. So an example, I hear that things have been busy for you, or I know it's been really stressful while we've been short-staffed here, and that's been heavy on you. Making sure that you're really understanding. And again, lead with that curiosity and compassion and making sure they feel heard. A really effective skill to use is just making sure after each person speaks that we're taking a moment to validate what they said to make sure that we actually got it right and understood them effectively. Finally, easy manner. Present as flexible and relaxed. When appropriate, use humor that is authentic to you or that helps you connect to the other. Choose compassion over being right. Remember that this is a person, just another person across from you, and that our goal here is to really maintain the relationship. So how can we choose that compassion and sense of understanding over just being right? Maybe, there's a different time and place where we can validate being right, but here we really want to share our appreciation for that person and even mention it when appropriate. And I want you to think about an example where someone did show up with an easy manner in response to you and what that felt like, how you noticed it, and really jot down any examples. And as we're moving through this skill of what that looked like and felt like. And so now we'll move into the maintain self-respect skills with FAST. FAST is, for those of us who said we might struggle with the self-respect piece of the triangle, this is for you. It's about being fair, no apologies, sticking to your values, and maintaining truthfulness. And it allows us to hold on to this respect for ourselves, our values, our self-respect, and our needs. So the quote here, you teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce. And FAST really helps us maintain all of these areas. So be fair in your requests and how you're communicating in the situation. Make sure that you're validating your feelings and wishes with the same fairness that you're holding the other person's needs. It's really important to think about this before going into the conversation is, am I honoring my own needs and values with the same intention that I'm holding theirs? And make sure that you're cultivating your compassionate voice before and during the interaction. Anytime I go into an assertive conversation, lead a webinar, engage in something, I start with a compassionate practice, a way of honoring my needs, honoring my values, and acknowledging that, that the common humanity and us both having needs and being deserving of kindness. So really making sure that you're going into this with your compassionate voice present and that you're being fair to yourself, not just dismissing your needs, even if that's something that has been learned in the past or that has become comfortable. No apologies. Now, this is one I usually like to illustrate with like a role play. But I think, kind of bring to mind when someone over apologizes when setting their boundaries. And even if, asking you for a favor, if I were to come and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry to bother you. I'm sorry. I just was wondering if maybe you could do this favor for me. It's okay if you say no. I'm sorry. I really don't want to bother you. Even just what is that cringy feeling that comes up, and even hearing me engage in that over apology. When we apologize, it tends to take away our respect and diminish the respect that the other person has for us. So with the exception of clearly apologizing for something that you've done and need to own up to, avoid making any unnecessary apologies or saying sorry like a broken record there. I hope my even small example illustrated that it can just, again, pull away from the respect and keep us from holding our own. We never need to apologize for how we feel, what you value or having a different opinion. And there is a way to respectfully assert, I see that you see the situation this way, and I really do see it differently without having to apologize for where you're coming from. This is one that, a lot of people don't notice they do, but when bringing more awareness to it, notice that they do tend to apologize, which diminishes self-respect. Stick to your values. So I'd really encourage revisiting your core values before the conversation. We do that in the Meru program, and also something that can help to revisit more regularly. But go through your core values. And for example, mine include curiosity, compassion, creativity, and imagine what each value might look like, feel like, and sound like. How you'd hold them with you during the interaction. So what might compassion say or encourage me to do? What might curiosity encourage me to do? How might my own self-compassion come to play in this? Be mindful of how they would each show up and encourage you, because our values really do help guide us in a conversation. Do not compromise your values for the sake of avoiding conflict or pleasing someone else. There's no need to say it's okay when it isn't okay. If anything, it's important, again, to take a break when we need it to revisit a conversation, but we don't, the whole goal of these skills is to not walk away feeling a sense of regret for either something we didn't say or something that we did say. And so we want to make sure that we're really holding our values. Here's an example here is, while I value spending time with you, I've already made plans to get errands done today. So, I hope we can spend time together a different time, or really making sure that we're validating both pieces of the puzzle without dismissing our own needs. And I want to encourage you here to revisit the practices from week 10 in the Meru program of exploring your values and identifying your values. Truthfulness. Stick to the facts. Try not to exaggerate, make any judgments, manipulate, or lie to make your point or get your needs met. Sometimes in the heat of an argument or in a conversation, we can exaggerate things or even lean into things that aren't necessarily true because we want to be heard and we want to feel right. Consider your future self in these situations and how you might feel if you exaggerate or you do lie. And instead of saying, you're being a jerk, narrate the facts and say, when I try to talk, you interrupt me. So instead of responding with any exaggeration or emotion mind, try to take a step back and really, again, narrate the situation. So you could say, I notice whenever I bring up my need, it's quickly dismissed, or I don't feel like I'm being heard. Really wanting to take on that gentleness while also maintaining this truthfulness. We don't want to exaggerate and again walk away feeling like we've done something that we're going to either now have to apologize for or correct later. So I'm going to encourage you to either take a screenshot or a picture of this, given where we're at with time, and I want to make sure we get to questions. But I think this script, or even if you jot it down, I think this script can really help us prepare for how we go into a conversation. So I communicate gently by, and be really specific here. Is it a facial expression? Is it an open body stance? Is it a softer tone? I can appear interested by, you could include here questions you might ask, things you might say, ways I can validate, ways to show easy manner. And then what is objectively fair to me in the situation? When might I feel compelled to apologize? What can I say/do instead of apologize? My core values guiding me in this conversation are, and what facts do I need to stick to in order to be truthful? So I see some questions coming up that I want to make sure we address. And this is a checklist of, kind of things to consider beforehand. Consider writing it in a journal or talking to a supportive person first, just to validate your unedited version of how you feel. Review the script beforehand. Get feedback from a trusted support who is not in the situation, or use the script as though it was being said to you, so that you can make adjustments with the interpersonal effective goals in mind. Before approaching the situation, make sure that you take 5 to 10 minutes to practice mindfulness and settle into a calm, wise-minded state. Visualize the conversation going well. A lot of times we assume it's not going to go well or we're going to get dismissed. And yet we haven't really been engaging in all of these skills that we can to show up as assertively and respectfully as we can. So what if it didn't work? I see quite a few questions coming up related to this, and I always get this question. So let's validate this. We can't always expect others to be our partner in crime being assertive communication. And therefore, we might be met with aggressive, passive, or passive-aggressive communication, or not get what we wanted when this person is in a place of power. And yet, while we validate that, we hold the other, using these skills does give us the best chance at not only walking away with what we want or setting a boundary and getting an effective response, we're also avoiding any regrets for what we said or didn't say. And we can walk away with self-respect, knowing that we acted in line with our values, we held our own, we did not dismiss our own needs or just, become passive and small, and that we didn't, say something that we would regret or that led towards aggression. It's really important that we acknowledge that we don't have control over the other person and how they might respond. However, these skills are, again, giving us the best chance at being responded to with assertiveness, getting what we want. And I would challenge you, I often still get the question, well, but what if they still are disputing us? If this is a relationship that is, nearing any sort of disrespect to where it is becoming, whether it be abusive or unhealthy, that is a time where we might need to bring in a third party or get some added support. However, in the situation where we are being met with at least enough respect to be able to hold a conversation with the other person, try these skills first, see what happens. We might not have a partner in crime. And in fact, people might even respond kind of differently to us because they haven't seen us respond this way. Maybe they're used to us being more passive or more passive aggressive in nature or aggressive, and they're not really sure how to respond when we're interacting in a different way. So it might take some time to get used to, but do trust that these skills are giving you the best chance at being heard and keeping the response from being dismissive to the best of our abilities. Always practice self-compassion as well, knowing that you did the best you could here, and knowing I'm free to let go of others' judgments. I trust that I have done my best to honor my needs while respecting the needs of others. Here I wanted to do a short self-compassion practice. And since we are very limited on time, I just want to take a moment to have you, either you can close your eyes or lower your gaze, but take a full breath. And I'll invite you to think about this difficult conversation or interpersonal situation and bring it to mind. And first acknowledge that it is a difficult situation. Noticing what comes up in your body as you do. And then acknowledging the common humanity in this experience. That this is something you've experienced before, and everyone around you has experienced before too. And I'll invite you to say to yourself in your mind, may I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself permission to let go of others' judgments. May I honor and acknowledge my willingness to respond differently in this situation. Can I trust that I've done my best to honor my needs while respecting the needs of others? May I show myself compassion for acting in line with my values. And may I honor that I have done anything in my control that I can to walk away without regret by responding respectfully and assertively. And may I be willing to revisit my boundaries if needed, knowing that in order to hold the assumption that everyone is doing the best that they can with the tools that they have, I have to hold and maintain boundaries that preserve my self-care. And take one more deep breath. And slowly return your attention to the present. I know we're at time here and that we covered a lot today. So I want to thank everyone for joining. I see your questions and wish I had a little bit more time for them. So I am going to put my email address in the chat and want to encourage anyone, if you have any questions that you'd like to follow up with, please don't hesitate to be in touch. Let me know. These are skills that I really love and utilize regularly. And so I'd be more than happy to follow up with you and make sure that we're getting some responses to your questions. With that, thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you next time.